Hello, and welcome to another episode of Get Your Fill Financial Independence and Long Life, where we explore ways to achieve those two goals. And I can tell you right now that Bronson Hill, who is with us today, is going to help us at least in the financial independence piece, if not the long life. But, the more money you have and the less taxes you pay, the longer and happier your life is potentially going to be. Um, Bronson is the managing sorry, we'll cut that out.
Yeah.
Bronson is the managing member of Bronson Equity. He's a general partner in 1,500 multifamily units worth over $150 million, which could be potentially a goal for you. Bronson co-leads a large in-person multifamily meetup, which is cool because we love to do things in person now, in Pasadena, California, called Phoebe Did I say that right, Phoebe?
Yeah, the Pasadena.
Phoebe Pasadena Multifamily. He's the host of the Mailbox Money Show, and he understands the investor mindset, having spoken individually over the phone with over 1,200 investors and having raised over $20 million for real estate deals. He's also the author of The Single Best Investment Strategy During or After a Pandemic, and a regular contributor to YouTube and to his blog. And Bronson, I'm so excited you're with us today.
Hey, I'm excited to be here, Christina. I love talking about wealth, love talking about improving your life and paying less taxes and all the things that we're going to talk about. So looking forward to all that.
Absolutely. So tell me, has this been your thing, like right from the beginning? Have you always been like a multifamily investor and
Yeah,
saw the value of it right out of the gate?
I came out of the womb and I just knew I wanted to invest. No,
Right.
no, I wish it's there. There's the idea that, I wish I'd gotten this sooner. I wish I'd gotten passive income. I wish I'd gotten understanding wealth sooner, but there's a saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So my background was actually medical device sales. I had a job where I was making good money. I was making over 200,000 a year, and I was working probably 30 hours a week. And some people would say, well, why isn't that enough? Why would you ever want to do something else? But what I realized is there's different forms of financial freedom. And, one is having enough money, but really a lot of people think they want more money when really what they want is more time, or more flexibility of time, or being able to be in different locations rather than being tied to a specific location. And so to me, I wanted to have more freedom over my time. And so I also have a lot of things that I'm really passionate about. I love travel. I love fighting human trafficking. So I just wanted to find ways to get more involved in those things.
Yeah.
So I had been doing single family houses because that's what I'd heard. If you want to become financially free, you start buying houses. But I realized the cash flow really was not as much as I wanted it to be. So it was still a lot of work. I had 4 or 5 houses. And then I had a chance encounter with a relative who said, hey, why don't you do multifamily? And multifamily apartments. And I was like, well, what's that? And how does that work? And well, I'd love to, but I don't have the money. And he said, well, you can actually raise the money through a process called syndication, which means you pool together, investors' funds, or you invest with them, and you go out and buy big apartment buildings. And I'd said, well, that's awesome, but I don't have the money. And he said, well, you can raise the money. So I became somebody who just learned all about that, dove right in, started a meetup, and started working with investors, and just, I've had over 1,300 one-on-one conversations, Zoom calls with investors. I feel like I really understand what a lot of wealthy professionals are trying to do, which is really retire to grow passive income. A lot of people again think that stocks or other things really actually generate income, but they don't. A lot of times they just generate appreciation, hopefully. Not guaranteed, especially in the stock market, but really trying to find a way to really grow cash flow and to be able to replace your living expenses. And that's what I was able to do about a year ago. I was able to retire from my great corporate job, and I've just had no regrets. I just love what I'm doing now. So it's been great.
Awesome. No regrets leaving the corporate world. That's hard to believe. Huh?
I know. I'm a corporate dropout and I love it. So
what is a recovering corporate person?
Yeah. Sometimes it takes a while to come down from that, because it can be such a grind. So
Absolutely. Well, we were going to, before we started off, we were going to have this kind of cool lead in where I was going to say something about how horrible inflation is, but now I think it's sounding kind of forced. So, but as investors, right, how do we potentially view inflation differently than maybe the average person just going to buy a loaf of bread for now $10?
Right. So inflation's all over the news. Everybody's talking about it. There's pain at the pump. We see it in food prices. We're seeing it in rents. We're seeing it in the cost of assets, such as buying houses, and financial assets, such as just all different types of things. So everybody's concerned about it, particularly basically poor and middle class folks are, because inflation really is your enemy, unless you really know how to take advantage of it and really make it your friend. And there is a way you can actually make inflation your friend, where it actually works for you rather than working against you. And so I wrote an ebook recently called How to Use Inflation to Your Advantage. And it's a 50-page ebook I offered on my website at bronsonequity.com. People can go download it. But basically, it talks about a few things. One thing is that inflation actually right now, people say officially it's 9.1%, at least at the time of this recording. There's a site called Shadow Stats, which basically looks at what inflation really is if you actually use the real price of food and the real price of energy and the real price of these things, because they've changed the way that they measure this over the years. And it says right now inflation is actually 15 to 17% per year. So if you look at that, that means 100,000 sitting in the bank is, 15 or, $17,000 loss per year. And a lot of people I know right now are just sitting on the sidelines saying, I'm just going to hold cash, and when things kind of calm down, then I'll invest. Well, if you wait 2 years, you could lose 30 to 40% of your wealth just by sitting there. So the way we try to take advantage of inflation is an investment like multifamily investing, where we're able to use leverage. We come in, we basically are able to finance usually 75 or 80% of the value of the property. And we're getting still rates of 4.5 to 5.5%. And people say, well, that's so much higher than it used to be. And I'd say, well, if inflation is 15 to 17%, you're really getting paid to get this loan. You're really actually getting paid to hold on to this. And we know there's kind of two positives. One is we're going to pay off this loan. And this works the same with single family, which I know you're an agent as well. So if you pay off in the future with dollars that are worth less because they're continuing to print more and more, it means it actually costs you less in the future. Secondly, the value of these properties, particularly income properties such as multifamily, we know is going to be worth more because rents generally keep pace with inflation, which that is what drives the cost or the value of multifamily apartments. So how to take advantage: if you take out cheap debt, not telling anybody specifically to do anything, but obviously consider it, look at your own situation. But if you can use that to go buy assets that pay you to hold them, you're cash flowing while you're knowing you have these assets are going to appreciate over time. So it's a pretty magical formula.
It is. And I want to make sure that people kind of grasp the whole idea. Like what you were saying, if you have 100,000 in the bank and it's actually going to have the buying power of $85,000, right, last year, and then next year it might have the buying power of $60,000. So you think about that. If you spend that, when you pay back that $100,000, you're really kind of only paying back 60,000, right? So that's kind of, I know it's kind of abstract when people aren't used to thinking that way, but the money that you're paying back is worth less. It's still, you still owe, X amount, but now when you pay it back, those dollars aren't as valuable as they were when you borrowed them.
Right. No, it's really something that's true. We haven't really had a time of high inflation like this since the late 70s, early 80s. And a lot of people that's a long time. So a lot of people really haven't invested when that's happened. And so a lot of people are still thinking with old ideas of, oh, things are going to crash. I mean, there was a 2-year period between February of 2020, and I talk about this in my ebook, February of 2020 to February of 2022, where they increased the money supply, money in bank accounts or physical money, by 40.9%, which is just a shocking number. We've never really had it that short of a time where they've done all this stimulus, all these different spending bills, whatever. And so the money has to go somewhere. There's no mechanism once you create the money to like put the money back or put it away. Like, it's out there. So you have all this new money chasing the same amount of goods, or I would even say less goods and services because of the pandemic, because supply shortages. So, I mean, that is the recipe for inflation, right? You have less goods and services and you have way more currency out there. And so, trying to find ways to get your wealth outside of dollars. And a lot of people have a hard time thinking that you actually can store wealth outside of dollars. And that's what you do. I know in real estate as well. Some people do precious metals. Some people, there's a case for cryptocurrencies or other things. Obviously, there's a lot more volatility there, but just finding things that you're not sitting in cash. And a lot of people are sitting in cash, or they're heavily invested in the stock market, which could have a lot of volatility coming. We don't know. That's a very uncertain. But we're taught by Wall Street that those are safe investments, even though they can crash by 50%. But it's a great job on marketing. And I'm actually a type of recovering corporate. I used to be an investment advisor for a few years as well. So I call myself a recovering investment advisor, because once you see behind the curtain, you see that a lot of stuff is not really created to serve the average investor.
Exactly. And there is something for me, an advantage for real estate, the fact that it's not just a piece of paper. I've owned companies that, overnight, the CEO ends up in jail and your stuff's now worth 14 cents a share. And you're like, what?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if Elon Musk like get hit by a bus, what's going to happen to Tesla stock overnight, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's investing in the car. They're all investing in Elon, right? I mean, that's
Mhm.
not to go down a whole big rabbit hole, but the fact that real estate is a place where you can go and you can do something with it, right? Nobody can just make it worth 14 cents overnight because it has value all by itself, right? It's not tied to any one person or I don't know.
Yeah, it really is. I think you bring up a good point. It's just the idea of supply and demand as well as something physical. It's something physical that you can own, you can see it. You know, if things got really bad, you always go live in it. So like there's like a high, functionality of this. And there's no technology that we foresee that people are not going to need a roof over their head or a place to live, right? There's no like advancement that we can't figure any other way around that's somehow going to change. Maybe it will someday.
Exactly.
Maybe we'll all sleep in pods or we'll have some weird thing that they do. But for
Well, they got to
now,
put the
it's
pods somewhere,
they got to
right?
put the pods somewhere. But I mean, right now there's a study, the National Association of Realtors came out a year ago and said that we're short 6.8 million housing units right now. And as a realtor as well, they're not building starter homes anymore. They're not building,
Right.
a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2,000 square foot house. They're building these tons of luxury homes. And
Right.
so there's a shortage of apartments. There's a shortage of houses. Where are all these people going to live? We're still growing in population, particularly in areas like where we buy in Jacksonville, Florida. We're just seeing just so many people moving to these areas. And we know that it's not going to get any cheaper to build. So if we buy older apartments, we develop, we renovate them, and then we just see it's a great place to be. So we try to look for things like that where it's we know there's going to be a consistent demand. It's not as there's a saying that good investing should be like watching paint dry or watching grass grow. If you want excitement, take $800 and go to Vegas. But like
Right.
good investing shouldn't it's not that sexy, right? Oh, I buy apartments and we renovate and we grow wealth over time. But
And
it's
every month we get all this money. That's
yeah,
it. Nothing
mailbox
more
money.
exciting than that, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
And I think as inflation does impact people, right? People who did not have the wisdom of, they didn't hear this podcast. They didn't realize that they should go hurry up and borrow some money or get into a syndicate with whatever, a couple of bucks that they had. And they're going to need an apartment because they can't afford, these crazy, ridiculously priced homes, and not even homes, even around here, the apartments that they're building and the condos and stuff. It's like you said, they're all going for that luxury market because they have to, right? Because material is so expensive, and you can't be building inexpensive housing when you're paying 3 times more for every 2x4, right? So you
yeah.
can't blame the builders. You just
Yeah, no, it's true. And it's interesting with luxury apartments because to build, you can't really build workforce apartments anymore. I mean, it's almost the same cost to build a luxury apartment as it is to build a what we call a class C, or like there's really not much difference. It's almost the same
right.
cost. So why would you not build something new and make it nice? But we typically actually go after stuff that's a little bit older, just because we see some ability to, like I mentioned, to renovate. I do see, if people are investing in newer apartments, there could be some risk there, just in the sense of, when if there is a dip, let's say all of a sudden there's a recession, it's pretty severe, like in Pasadena, California, where I live, a 2-bedroom goes for $4,600 a month in these luxury apartments. Well, they're not going to get that if there's a big recession, right? They're going to have to
Right.
come down versus on working class apartments that are maybe not necessarily a place that you or I would want to live, but they're nice enough. And these are working class people that are really working hard. If you can create a nice, place for them and do some renovations, you're able to bring rents up to market. It can be a really great business idea. So
Absolutely. I know my boyfriend has some properties in a vacation, and because it's a vacation area, everybody's on Airbnb, so there's nowhere for people to live, right? All the people who are waiting
right,
on you at the restaurant and taking your ticket somewhere, there's nowhere for those people to live. So all through COVID, nobody was late on their rent. Nobody was right. All these other people are having all these problems, and these folks are like, oh, we just have to keep this apartment. We really love living here, and we don't want to try to have. So I don't know. There's something to be said for that as well. Like you say, the luxury people. I had people paying, I think, 4 times more at a property that I manage in town, and they're like, oh, well, we can't go to school anymore, so we just don't want to pay our rent. And so I'm like, really?
yeah, yeah, and that also depends where you invest or where you buy. I mean, in the city of Los Angeles, we own actually over 200 million now in multifamily, and it's all in the southeast. But in the city of Los Angeles, they passed the eviction moratorium to extend now till June of 2023. Just for any reason, landlords can't really, you can see them about driving new cars, whatever you can't, there's no recourse and there's no additional help. And UCLA recently did a study and found that 51% of people in the city of LA have stopped paying rent. So again, it also depends where you buy and what you're doing. Like in Florida, we actually can buy places, we can renovate them, we can increase rents by adding value, but every area is a little different. That's why it's important to look at where you buy. And that's why I get a lot of people in California that want to invest out of California because of that reason.
It's just a little too liberal.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So let's, I think I want to jump now into this whole concept of not paying taxes. So first of all, we're making money by taking out loans because we don't have to, we're paying it back with cheaper money. And how about if we're also not paying tax on that money? How is that possible?
Well, it's been said that, there's two certainties in life, death and taxes, but I would say the second one is optional. And you might say, well, that's crazy. How would you do that? But there is a way to legally reduce your tax bill potentially to zero. Again, as I share this is not giving anybody any specific financial or tax advice. I'm just sharing my own experience. But the last several years, while I was still working my corporate job, making a great income, I was able to reduce my taxes to almost zero, to about a 1% total tax rate. And I saved, 150K just of what I literally would have saw going out. And how I did it. There's something in the tax code called the real estate professional. If somebody is a real estate agent, they would qualify a lot of times. If somebody is an investor full time, if they do stuff around, there's certain real estate type of activities you can do. But what it means is you have 51% of your working hours have to be working on real estate related activities. And it's got to be at least 750 hours a year. So it can be for you or potentially even your spouse. So what some people have done is they found a way to have their spouse, maybe they're a physician and they found a way to have their spouse qualify. But what it allows you to do is it allows you to take passive tax losses or depreciated losses from deals like multifamily syndication, like what we do. And there's a lot of groups that do this. I'm not just pitching my stuff, but like, for example, $100,000 investment in a multifamily deal typically offers about $90,000. It can offer about $90,000 worth of passive losses in year one. So what does that mean? It means you didn't necessarily make any money the first year. You made very little money, but you have all of these paper losses that you can use against other investment income. So again, for most people, it works on if you had a house and you sold it or other sorts of passive gains, you could basically use that against that. But for other people, you actually can move it from this side all the way over to here, which is your ordinary income. And again, it only works that way if you are a real estate professional. So again, you can kind of bridge that over. So it can be really substantial to explore that. Most CPAs don't know how this works, so they don't really work with a lot of real estate professionals.
Yeah.
But if you find a real estate CPA, I'm also happy to refer help if anybody has any questions on that. But it can be really magical because I watch people that make a lot of money and all of a sudden they're paying no money. And I realized for me, I could make 200K or I could make 140K and not pay taxes on it, and I'd be making the same amount. And that was also another thing like, wow, I actually could leave my job here. This is amazing. So just knowing that that's possible and knowing that, by exploring it is something that could be very transformational for a lot of people.
Absolutely. So if people don't understand, I mean, I hope we've talked about this enough on the show, but someone who might be tuning in for the first time, how passive losses kind of work with real estate, how you can well, if I lost $90,000, that's terrible. Like, well, you didn't really lose it. Can you just talk a little bit more about how that works?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, let's just go back to this example, 100K invested, and let's say there was a $90,000 passive depreciated loss. So what happens is there were some changes to the tax code a few years ago. We were able to bring forward all of these taxable losses. For example, when you own a house, you get a write-off every year for maybe I think it's over 27 and a half years. You can write off the entire cost of the house. You get a deduction for doing that every year just by owning a house. It works the same in apartments, but we do something called a cost segregation study, which just means we have a firm come in and kind of divide the property into 4 different parts. It's land improvements, buildings, and equipment. And it's not really important to know all that. It's just important to know that parts of it, the building and the equipment, you can bring forward instead of a 10-year or 25-year, whatever the schedule is, you can bring it all to year one. Now, when you resell, like a lot of these deals we do, they last for 5 years or a few years. When you sell, there's a prorated recapture. So that means if I took the 90,000 now and I sell it in 5 years, well, I didn't only use this percentage of the 25-year schedule, you do recapture. So maybe some of that you have a taxable basis in 5 years. But if you were able to use that money now and now 100K invested, could become 200K and you reinvest in other deals, there's some other taxable benefits of that. So what happens is the goal potentially is you can continually defer a lot of these gains just perpetually into the future. So that's really the goal of doing this. And again, if you can save money now over the next 5 years, what would the returns on the money you would have been taxed this year or next year or the year after that be? So it compounds much quicker, it compounds much faster. And if you ask me, would I rather pay taxes in 5 years or pay taxes now? Of course, I'd rather pay in 5 years or never. Or just and then you might find a
Exactly.
way that you can defer things in the future. So it can feel a little advanced if you have the right tax person. It's really not that advanced, since people can search the term real estate professional. They can also search the term, syndication, or cost segregation,
Mhm.
or depreciation from syndication, those type of things. Or they can reach out to me, and I'm happy to explain it as well. Or we have a lot of stuff on our YouTube as well.
Yeah. Well, and the cost segregation can be really, depending on the building, right to the minutia, right? You can say, okay, the heating system, that's on a 7-year schedule, and this other, right? Different pieces of equipment have different depreciation schedules. I know when if I go buy a place and I fix up the kitchen, for example, we'll depreciate 100% of the old kitchen the first year, and then we put the new kitchen on, a different schedule. And I mean, it can be kind of, fancy, but the fact that you don't have to do it yourself, you just have an accountant who understands these things. And that's an excellent point that you brought up, because not every accountant is going to say, oh, look, you're paying too much taxes. Let me help you and, figure all things out for you, because that is not all accountants are created equal. Just like not, whatever. I don't know. Not all real estate investments are the same, and not all accountants are the same. So if you have a specialty, if you're doing something and making money in a certain way, you want to take that little extra time and find the person who actually has a good knowledge, and maybe they own their own real estate. And so they've looked into ways to save some money and things like that. Right.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. No, I think it's really true. I mean, my CPA is a good CPA. I've had, she's been doing it over 30 years. And when I started doing this, I had to really kind of educate her and say, this is what the tax code says, whatever. She's not a real estate CPA, but I was able to kind of show her how that works, and she was responsive, and we did it.
Yeah.
Now, other people, I know they've had to switch CPAs, and there are people that are really good at real estate, and they can kind of teach you. Or there's tax strategists. Some people sell a business, and this is, we've heard stories of people selling a business, for $1 million or multi-million dollars. Actually, I just had dinner with a couple of guys who are dentists, and they were selling a practice, and the net proceeds were like $4.5 million. And so, but they figured out how to reduce their taxable basis to about $100,000 on that sale, like to literally pay it something like it was so low. It was like a couple percent, or it was very, very low. And how they did it was through their spouses being real estate professionals. And so sometimes, again, somebody's a very high earner, and they have different things, and they find a way. And people call them loopholes, but really the government, they create incentives, right? They have to
Right.
provide affordable housing. They've got to find ways to provide energy, and different. And they want to do these things. It's much
Right.
more efficient if they help individuals and really incentivize them. So that's really what we do, is we partner with the government. I mean, they kind of give it to you in the tax code. What do you do to try to pay less taxes? How do you do this? And they give you some guidelines on that. So I look at them like incentives and not like loopholes.
I really like that you're partnering with the government to save money on your taxes.
Yeah.
I really like that.
Yeah, and they tell you, hey, if you don't have to pay, these are here. These are like things that we need to get done. We need more affordable housing. Obviously, we know there's a short. We know there's these certain issues. Well, how do we incentivize this? We could either do it ourselves, or we can just incentivize individuals or companies to do this. And those are
Exactly.
ways that we're able to partner, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, you're also helping the economy at the same time. You're giving people better housing, and you can feel really good about yourself and about your life. And in the meantime, you're getting all this money in your mailbox. It's just right. It just
Yeah,
take the time to learn. People don't listen to everybody who just says, oh, death and taxes, and oh, you have to, you can't do that. Well, you can do that. People are doing that. You just need to
yeah,
stop and figure out exactly how that happens, right? If
exactly.
but
Yeah, that's it. And that's a lot of times we say, the question is, that we say is, I can't do that, or I could never do that. It's like, well, the right question is, well, how can I do that? When I first started doing this, I had no idea what I was doing. And so
yeah,
it was this very uncomfortable feeling. But I think I tried to learn, well, how can I do that? How could I raise money for an apartment deal? How could I? And then I just got to try to get around other people that were doing this, or people that I could learn, or, being on YouTube or going to conferences. And the power of networking and education is you can learn so much. And whether you want to do your own deals, like where you want to do what we're doing, or you want to be passive, just getting around other people that are doing stuff, you're going to learn so much and it could be life changing for you.
Absolutely. And you don't have to, I mean, that is a big problem that people have. They think exactly as you said when you were starting, I don't have the money to do that. I can only afford to buy single family homes. Well, surprise, here you go. This is the power of partnering with other people. And I think it's a big surprise to people when they first start looking for money, like how many people are actually there saying, "Oh, you've got a great investment for me. Here's the money." And you're like, "Wow, people are throwing money at me." I'm
Yeah,
having more trouble finding the deals than I am finding the money. And it's just,
right.
I think that's a surprise. And what kinds of things were, I guess, happily surprising, or maybe what was the biggest challenge when you first started getting into the syndication?
Yeah, I think that when you first start, I just had a conversation where we actually teach people now. We have a coaching program where we teach people, a group called Kingdom REI, on how to do this. And this person just felt totally overwhelmed. Boy, it feels like, oh, get a kind of an overview of how it works. It just, oh my gosh, that feels like, and I can totally relate to that feeling of just feeling overwhelmed. I should be doing all these things and I don't even know how to do this. And I should be talking to friends and family and creating stuff online. It just felt the whole process of doing it and just even understanding how it worked felt really overwhelming. And so I think the biggest thing is you just try to stay in it. You just try to keep going and just learn one new thing, a day, or just try to, listen to a podcast or get on some sort of training or talk to someone about it or go to events. And as you do these things, and then also, as you start telling friends and family about what you're doing, even as a passive investor, hey, this is what I'm doing. They will introduce you to other people. They will introduce you to other ideas. They will show things, or they'll, a lot of people don't realize this, but if we know a little bit about something, we will know a lot more than about 99% of people. And so like, just enough to be dangerous, right? So you're like, okay, I've heard about this thing and you can pay no taxes, whatever. You start telling
Yeah,
people, oh my gosh, well, it's, and a lot of people would be very, very interested to hear about that. Right. And sometimes,
absolutely.
so I think the big thing is we realize we don't have to be an expert on anything. We can be a leader in the space just by trying to create a conversation, creating a resource, creating an event like what you're doing, creating a podcast. We do that with the Mailbox Money Show, trying to create a place where people can get value. And as you do that, it's just amazing the doors that open. So I would say for anybody who just, is interested in learning, the more you get into this, the more you start learning about it, the more things open up for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I feel like, Bronson, that we've talked about these two topics that I really wanted to touch on, but is there anything that you really wanted to talk about, or any question you wish I would have asked you that I just haven't touched on?
No, I think it's great. I think the biggest, we talked about reducing taxes and just how you can make a lot more money that way. And again, I think for people, just understanding, I think everybody should understand how passive investing really works, particularly in multifamily syndication. We call it the bread and butter of investing because it's very understandable. It's a very, simple investment. I remember having a physician who had a net worth. I've had all these calls with people, and you get to ask a lot of personal and financial questions. This was a physician that had a $5 million net worth and had only done stocks and bonds. And
Yeah.
so, we're just trying to get him to understand that, hey, by putting a small amount for him, which 50 or 100,000 is a lot for some people, but for him, it's not a high percentage of his net worth. But
Right.
the goal for someone like that who's never done it is to get into one or two deals, get some confidence to say, oh, wow, this actually can work. I actually can develop cash flow. I can develop passive income, and it doesn't have to take up more of my time, except for vetting the deal and vetting the property. So I think that's really, I think, the magic thing that I try to really help people understand is just,
Yeah.
that it is possible. It is absolutely possible to grow passive income. It's possible to grow your wealth without taking up more of your time. And once you replace your living expenses, they call it the rat race number. There's this game behind me called Cash Flow 101 that Robert Kiyosaki put together. And
Yep.
once you replace your expenses, you're financially free. You can work if you want to, or if you don't want to, you don't have to work. And it's just the ability to have that freedom, or know that you have it. It gives a lot of
Yeah.
security, a lot of comfort for a lot of people. So I think that's really great.
Absolutely. But there's 2 points that you brought up I just want to quickly touch on it. And one is that when you're talking, you're high net worth individual, you've got this financial planner and they're helping you with your stuff. And how many financial planners ever mention real estate as an investment, right? It's very rare.
Mhm.
So that's one place where people feel a little uncomfortable. And the other is when people think about real estate investing, they think about fix and flip and they think about buy and hold. And they are not often aware that there are other formats that would allow them to not be fixing toilets in the middle of the night, or, at least wielding a hammer or anything. You're never going to have
Mhm.
to take a wall down unless you want to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, people just they don't know it's there, and if it's not as if it sounds too good to be true, it may be interesting to learn more. And if you meet people that, Wall Street is just, I like I said, I'm a recovering investment advisor. You're highly incentivized to put people into financial products that are really paper. I mean, they're really like there's counterparty risk, which is if a company fails, meaning the company you invested in, or the group that kind of put together this offering, or any sort of financial firm fails that's involved with that, you could lose all of your investment. And that's not something that's really talked about a lot. But when you own an asset, it's called real estate, right? It actually is the
It's
original
real.
thing. And some people don't realize this, that in 1929, stocks lost 89% of their value over several years. And you think about that today. If a lot of people have a lot of their wealth in the stocks or bonds, that if something crashed, it could affect both of those. And it didn't come back. Say, oh, it'll come back, it'll come back. Well, it didn't come back to where it was for 25 years. It took 25 years. It didn't until 1954. So you think about if things truly crashed today in a similar fashion, which I'm hoping they don't, but if they did, it'd be till 2047 until they came back. I mean, just think about how shocking and hurtful that would be for so many people that have
Right.
put their
We're
whole life
relying on that for
savings
their
into
retirement
that.
and everything.
And yeah, and a lot of people that are investment advisors, they're incentivized to get you to buy and hold no matter what happens, because they're paid on fees. And of large investment managers, over 50% have $0 invested in what they're managing, which is kind of shocking, right? It's just kind of shocking that so many people, they have no money, like literally zero money, and they're
Right.
telling you exactly what you should do. So
Yeah,
anyway, it's amazing how we've been kind of brainwashed that this is the best way to invest, in my opinion.
exactly. Exactly. Fantastic. Bronson, thank you so much for being with us today. Tell us how people can reach you.
Yeah, so I have, like I mentioned, I have this guide here. This is called "How to Use Inflation to Your Advantage," and it's
We need
basically a
that.
50-page guide. Some of the strategies we talked about. It does talk about using debt, using multifamily or other real estate assets. It talks about precious metals and crypto and other things. So you get that on my website, bronsonequity.com. You can take a look at that. I'd love to connect with anybody if they're interested in joining our investment club. We also do have some investors join us on deals as well. But it's really great to be here, Christine. Really appreciate you having me on today.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Bronson. And so if listeners, thank you so much for being here and listening to us. I know you have a choice of about 2 million podcasts, and we're happy that you're here. But if you know anybody who might possibly want to save money on their taxes, maybe you want to forward this episode to them so that they can also take advantage of the wisdom that you just learned from Bronson. And make sure you're here next week, because who knows what we'll be having in store for you then. Have a great one.